Welcome into another edition of The Wrap. This is Mark Ennis from ESPN Louisville, and a new face to welcome to the program. Louis Rabaut in the house, also from ESPN Louisville. Thank you for joining us, and you even brought a prop this time around.
I did.
We've never brought props on the show. We'll start bringing random items.
If you're curious, it just says smile on it. That's all it says. It doesn't refer to anything.
Big Blue Nation is smiling like the laptop because they're actually figuring this out a little bit. With the two games, you got a nice variety of like an Oscar-dominated win against Georgia, but then against Texas A&M, it was really about the supporting cast.
I think it's still a wait and see with Kentucky basketball. You get the Tennessee game where Tennessee commits a lot of basketball sins.
Yeah.
Misses a lot of open threes and frankly, layups. I mean, I think they missed a half dozen layups without hitting the rim. Those are the sorts of things you cannot do and do lead to those kinds of upsets on the road. But frankly, what's been interesting is obviously Xavier Wheeler gets hurt, isn't able to play. The lineup changes. It's the thing that everyone on Twitter has been yelling about, and Twitter was right for once. And so it's an interesting melange of guys. Toppin has gotten most of the accolades, I think, but really it's been Antonio Reeves that's been the great recipient of the minutes. He's averaging now 28 over the last 3 games, 17 points and 2 rebounds in those games.
And this is the first game in a while we've not heard any of the opposing coach be like, yeah, we try to do pick and roll at Oscar and all that stuff. Yeah. It just seems to me like it necessarily not a big bunch of changes X's and O's wise as much as somewhere in there they just started physically, I think, sort of pushing people around a little bit more. And I think in this after this A&M game, you know, there was a little bit of a conciliatory tone from Cal towards the fans, and kind of an invitation to give it back, I think, from him. And it's good if you're a Kentucky fan to see, like, he did not fold. You know, when this was ugly after South Carolina, he did not pout. Nothing, you know, sort of antics or anything. Just sort of dug in.
It takes an incredibly special team, and we've seen them locally here in Louisville, where the smallest guy is the dog on the team. Yeah. But it's hard if a 5'9" Xavier Wheeler is going to be your dog, is going to be your most physical player. Simply, that isn't going to work. The SEC from 10 years ago to now is a completely different basketball conference. You simply cannot operate that way. So even if that's a first-team SEC player, if the spacing's not there, if the toughness is run by a guy who's 5'9" and seems to just run into other players on offense, simply put, it wasn't sustainable long-term to make frankly, just to make the tournament. And so now they seem to have something. Casey Wallace hasn't been great the last 3 games.
No,
and it's still a better lineup for them. And so, you know, that Toppin, Reeves, Frederick, whatever that combination is, like Mark mentioned, whatever that change in mindset has been, it's been a net positive.
And I think it's Jacob Toppin doing a lot of dirty work. Yep. Honestly, he's such
from
a
the
good
Louisville game
athlete.
forward, really.
Yeah.
When he's been healthy.
To attack the boards and defend the way he's been defending, I think changes a lot. Takes a lot of pressure off of Oscar Tshiebwe. The Wheeler dynamic is really interesting to me because we're not talking about a guy who hasn't produced at the college level. He's been one of the SEC's best point guards in terms of distributing the ball. Obviously, the shooting issue with him is well documented. But what do you do with him now? Do you insert him back in there? Do you sit him down and say, hey, look, I know you're one of my older leaders on this team, but this might be the role that's better for you to make an impact off the bench as opposed to being a part of this lineup that's working right now?
I think that's exactly what you have to do. Is you have to hope that the senior guy is going to be a leader off the court more than just on the court. I mean, frankly, and it's got to be devastating to be, you know, preseason at first team All SEC, and then the coach comes to you after an injury. Yeah. When coaches, I'm sure, say, hey, you're not going to lose your spot to injury, right? And then you get hurt, and then the lineup is just better. The team's better. And they just are, and it's just a reality. You would hope that your senior leader looks at that and says, okay, this is the best place for me to make one last good run in the NCAA tournament.
Doing the right thing in those moments, when it's sincere and it really is helping the team and no one's kind of getting played and screwed or anything, it has a tendency to find its way back to you, and it's sort of a reward for that sort of thing. And I would hope that he would do that as well. I'm fascinated just to see if this more general comfort level with them shooting threes. I mean, 32 threes, they made 11, but so it's not a great percentage, but it was more. I mean, that would represent a real change in him, and we've not seen that before.
I think that also reflects the lineup change as well, though, because you have 2 shooters in there in Antonio Reeves and C.J. Frederick, and Cal has said it a million times before. If you don't shoot it and you're kind of open, I'm taking you out. And it's those 2 guys who have to do that. Casey Wallace is a better shooter than he's given credit for, but that storyline is much better than the storyline you were dealing with a couple weeks ago. If you're Louisville basketball, you would love to find anything positive to work with at this moment in time, and it's just not happening. And for some reason, that Pitt loss, it triggered something, and I'm not quite sure what it was, because that game looked like almost every other loss this season. Pitt made a big run. There were a lot of Louisville turnovers that were pretty inexplicable, and it cost them the game.
The Pitt loss has, I think, a bunch of storylines kind of converged to make it extra frustrating or off-putting for fans. Louisville's never lost to Pitt at the Yum Center before. Even the worst of Louisville teams has always sort of unloaded on Pitt. During the Kevin Stallings years, even, they did that sort of thing. Like, no matter what, they've been able to do that. And Pitt kind of represents what Louisville is right now. Like, a year ago, they were the worst. And they had to go portal heavy, and now they've come back, and now they're kind of a bubble team. But I think more than anything, it was the body language of everyone for Pitt, from Jeff Capel to the whatever 10th, 11th player that got in the game. Every one of them wasn't the least bit afraid, intimidated, concerned about anything, to the point that we got a player trash talking Kenny Payne, like, in the game. But it's never looked like that before, and it was maybe not rock bottom, but just kind of a fresh realization. Like, the veneer is off, and people have taken to heart the fact that there's nothing to be afraid of right now.
And the other part of it is there's no hiding from what you just talked about, especially the trash talking thing. And then Payne talks about it in the post-game press conference, and everyone yucks it up. And there's a bunch of fans that have to be thinking, what's funny about this?
Right.
And I sympathize with them. It's not funny. If you spend your winters watching Louisville basketball, and it's something you've done for decades, and they're laughing after a 2-17 start, I would be furious.
There's no intimidation factor of coming to Louisville and playing, when Louisville has traditionally been a pretty tough place to play, to come in and impose your will.
If you see any kind of anxiety or anything, intensity from the other team, I think there's a fear of losing to Louisville now, because it would be bad for you.
Yeah.
Not, I'm afraid of playing them. But I think there's also very obviously a mark on every scouting report: this team will fold, because teams go for it now. They look for it now, and it's never been like that before. And it really, to me, it just sort of underscores this whole thing that I think the biggest blunder Kenny's made is not about who he's recruited or hired or anything. It's his whole, I think, approach to confidence. How players get it, how they have it, why they might lack it, whatever, has been wrong from the start. And this whole insistence on sort of being a little softer even with them, so that they'll feel more confident, has left them, I think, feeling more exposed. They're not confident. They don't think they're going to win. They don't think they're going to play well.
Jeff Capel made it a point to compare this year's Louisville team to last year's, and say that last year's Louisville team, in the second meeting when they went to Pittsburgh, he thought that team had quit. Jeff Capel didn't think that this current team had quit. But a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now are the characteristics of a team that is either close to quitting or already has.
I don't know about quit, but there does seem to be like an ever-growing motion going through by this team.
Yeah.
A whole lot easier to get that 17-0 run. A lot less climbing all the way back from your 22-point deficit or whatever. Like, it does. I don't think they're quitting, but there does sort of seem to be even less of like the perfunctory pushback that they had earlier.
I worry more about, from a big picture sort of thing, just where do we go from here? What are we accomplishing right now that gives you any kind of confidence? People keep talking about, oh, they'll reload in the transfer portal. Why? Who wants to come to this? It's now multiple years. We're stacking years on years at this point. This isn't one bad 2-17. I mean, this is 3 guys in a row who have told you, I can't work with the guys in this locker room.
If you say, the team is not very good and we're basically going to sort of power wash this whole thing and bring in a whole new crew, then this season is accomplishing nothing right now.
Right.
Or if you're culture building, well, then you should be playing younger guys and not your son or players who are going to be out of here, after this year. Nothing's consistent with what the story is.
The men's program searching for answers. I will make the argument that the women's program, even though they have a loss to NC State, they are looking better. I think they've played a tough stretch of their schedule pretty closely and pulled out some wins and suffered some close losses. But to break those down, we're going to bring in Alexis, Cubit, and Chrissy Banta. And here they are now, Alexis Cubit from the Courier-Journal and Chrissy Banta from ESPN Louisville. The Louisville women's basketball team falls 63-51 to NC State, and we got to make a whole segment out of this, but it's going to be kind of difficult to not just discuss over and over how poor the shooting performance was for the Cardinals. 30% for the game, second worst mark of the season, but 1 for 16 in the fourth quarter. It was pretty ugly when they were defending a good team well.
Yeah, when you consider that one came within the last, I think, 2 or 3 minutes, I mean, that was a rough half for them. But I will say, to keep it as close as they did, having only shot 1 field goal says a lot about their defense.
Yeah.
So I think if you want to take one positive thing from this, it would be that the defense played well. I think they played with a different level of intensity that maybe we haven't seen before, which was nice to see. Rebounding was a really big thing. I mean, they had 13 offensive rebounds, but only 2 second chance points. So again, going back to the scoring, it always leads back to the scoring right now. For as well as they played defense, for as well as they rebounded, it's all about the scoring.
9 for 20 on layups. That's gonna leave a little bit of a sting in the team after this one. I think Jeff's gonna really get into them about those fundamentals before they head down to Wake Forest on Thursday. But as Alexis said, defensively, this was one of their best performances of the year, and I don't think there's much arguing that. And I think that's something that they need to carry further into ACC play with them. We're getting to a point where we're a little bit cornered. We don't necessarily need to win out in ACC play, but there's several opportunities coming up that they really need to take advantage of.
Yeah, and the defensive improvement, I think, is huge because that's what this program has really defined itself on under Jeff Walz. But the complete game just hasn't quite come together yet. I even asked him afterwards, you guys have typically been a strong offensive team this year, so I think it was surprising to see them miss some open looks. And 9 for 20 on layups, some of these games, the margin for error, especially against an opponent like NC State, who's now beaten Louisville 4 straight times in a tight series, that's the difference in the game when you can't convert those, for lack of a better word, bunnies at the rim.
Yeah, I mean, you even look at the one play that sticks out to me is when Cece had that steal and that fast break. She misses it. Haley's right there to rebound it. Now, Haley was surrounded by 2 NC State players, but she did create some separation, and she misses it. If you're, lacking on defense, you could say you can get quicker. If you aren't rebounding, you can say let's learn how to box out. But if their look is good, you have a wide open shot, how do you say let's not work on that?
Yeah, and I think that was a lot of the problem. They were getting really good looks. The shots just weren't falling. And Tyler and I kind of touched on earlier today the lack of offense from the bigs that we were seeing. We did have a lot of good rebounding from Olivia, but she had 0 points. And while she's not necessarily a player that we're relying on for offense in the same way that we rely on, say, Cece or Haley, you still need those bigs to come in and get under the rim and make those layups and make those shots.
Yeah, Haley definitely had a rough shooting performance, but it's kind of hard to single one person out when everybody had a rough shooting performance in this one. But the defensive intensity is something to watch moving forward. And over the past couple of weeks, I feel like this team is a little bit closer to maybe what people expected coming into the season, even with 2 losses in that stretch to good teams in Virginia Tech and NC State. You feel like they're right, maybe kind of on the edge of, I don't know if I want to say a breakthrough, but finding the form that many expected coming into the season.
Well, you look at that second quarter, I think that is their potential.
Yeah.
That second quarter, I mean, they shot 52% in that quarter. They forced 6 turnovers in that quarter. I don't remember what NC State shot, but, I mean, they outscored them 20-12. That second quarter is what you would expect to see them, which is ironic because Haley sat the first, I think, couple minutes.
She did.
So now it's good to see they don't have to depend on her. Those 2 players, Chrislyn and Morgan, that they brought in to be those scorers and those people that they can depend on, you saw where they can depend on them for that. And I think if there's anything to take, you focus in on that second quarter and say, okay, how do we replicate this moving forward?
100%. And I think that NC State had a really good opportunity to just blow this game wide open. And if it weren't for Chrislyn Carr, they probably would have.
She was lights out.
She was absolutely lights out. She had 11 of our 13 first quarter points. And Haley didn't see her first points until halfway through the second quarter. And as you said, the second quarter is the epitome of what Louisville women's basketball is. So if they can kind of focus in on that and really dial in on everything they were doing in the second quarter and hit the stride that you were talking about, that they're just on the cusp of hitting right now, then they have a very good shot at going pretty deep into the ACC and the NCAA tournament.
And I will say this next stretch is winnable. Not to say that you take any ACC team lightly, but I think with the potential that they've shown and the team that they have coming up, this will be a make or break. And how bad do you want, these next wins?
And we know we'll have these 2 back to break all of that down once it happens. Alexis Cubit from the Courier-Journal, Chrissy Banta from ESPN Louisville. I'm Tyler Greever. Thanks for watching another edition of The Wrap.